Hello, it's Professor Eric Steinhardt, and let's talk about the ways that cannabis is used in terms of mentality, the ways that people use it to affect their minds or to alter certain medical conditions of the mind or just wellness conditions of the mind that people find uncomfortable or don't like and somehow want to treat. Now, in fact, the three top uses of cannabis, right, are for pain, anxiety, and depression. Now, it's not clear if these are really medical uses or if they're just uses to help facilitate wellness or a kind of holistic health, right? And so, if somebody claims that they're using cannabis in a certain way for pain or anxiety or depression, that might be medical. But maybe somebody doesn't quite have a medical condition of pain or anxiety or depression. This is a really ambiguous gray area, and it can be an ethically problematic area for the use of cannabis. But let's think about these three conditions: pain, anxiety, and depression. What about pain? Well, the endocannabinoid system, right, the system of cannabis like molecules in your body, is closely associated with the regulation of pain. Pain. What is pain? And you might say, well, pain just hurts. Yeah, but what does pain mean? Pain is generally associated with threat detection, right? When you feel a pain in your finger, it means something is threatening the integrity or functionality of your finger, right? Maybe it's getting crushed or it's getting cut. Something is destroying the ability of your finger to do what it's supposed to do. And so that's a pain signal that tells your body to protect your finger. So pain refers to a threat, and it has the meaning of telling your body to protect your finger. You feel a pain in your foot, and that means protect your foot. A pain in your gut alerts you to some damage being done to something in your gut and issues the signal which has a meaning of protecting your gut. Your brain says, okay, I have to protect my gut. I have to do something. Pain is stimulating. Now, there are people who have genetic modifications or mutations to their endocannabinoid system that cause them to not feel pain. There's a Scottish woman, Jo Cameron, who feels no pain because her endocannabinoid system never degrades certain endocannabinoids, namely anandamide. Right? And anandamide is the molecule that's pretty much most similar to THC. She's not really high all the time, but kind of. She's just kind of blissed out and feels no pain. And there are other people like her and have been through history. It's rare, but these mutations do happen. You might think, gee, that'd be great, not to feel pain. Wow, what a wonderful world. Except people who can't feel pain usually die horribly at early ages. Right? They bite their tongues in half. They burn parts of their body. They get cuts or broken bones that they don't know they have, and they die. Jo Cameron has been very, very lucky to be able to survive into adulthood. Most people who can't feel pain, they just die, and the deaths are often horrible. Right? They get a bad cut, they don't know it, and they just bleed to death. They're walking around in their living room bleeding to death. It's terrible. So, right, they don't get a signal that says protect your body. But some people, in some cases, the signals for protection are out of whack, right? There's something dysfunctional in the pain system, or, right, you have excessive pain, maybe joint pain from arthritis, pain from cancer. It's pathological pain and you want to decrease it. So one of the things taking something like THC can do, THC imitates anandamide in this respect. It hits certain CB receptors in your nervous system, in your brain, and it turns down the sensitivity of your threat detectors. This is one of the key insights into what THC does, and CBD in a somewhat different sense. They turn down the sensitivities of your threat detectors, and they decrease the intensity of the message that says protect your body. Let's look at how this works with anxiety, right? What's anxiety? Anxiety is a generalized kind of threat awareness. It's not like you're aware that there's a specific threat, right? But anxiety can lead to generalized threats of to your well-being, to the integrity or existence of your body, right? And so you might be anxious about taking a test, but you're not really anxious about the test. You don't exactly fear getting a bad grade. I mean, you might, but anxiety is more general. Anxiety is like, I fear getting a bad grade, so I fear like I'm gonna, flunk out of school. I won't be able to get a good job. I won't be able to have money, and I'm gonna end up in some horrible state, living under a bridge. I'm gonna be sick. No one will love me. And anxiety kind of spirals out of control into a very generalized fear of a hostile world. The whole world is threatening in anxiety. And so your threat detectors are way too sensitive, right? Yeah, there are threats to your well being, there are threats to your existence, there are hostile enemies in the world. But no, they're not all around you all the time right now. Right? When your threat detectors become too sensitive, anxiety can overwhelm you. And so people can take CBD, for instance, to decrease anxiety. Pretty good evidence that it has some positive effect there. Also, small doses of THC. And by small dose, I'm talking about microdosing, right? I'm talking about doses like a quarter of a milligram, half a milligram, or a milligram at most. These are doses that don't get people high, right? But they might turn down those anxiety threat detectors. Here it's interesting to note that THC is biphasic. Now, biphasic means two effects or two ways. Low doses of THC, microdosing, can decrease or prevent anxiety, whereas high doses can trigger it or cause it, so that lots of people who take a lot of THC report having bad anxiety as an adverse or negative side effect, right? So maybe there's some point there, and this would depend on the individual. Less than 2 milligrams of THC helps treat your anxiety, decreases it. More than 2 milligrams makes you anxious. 5 milligrams makes you super anxious and dysfunctional. So THC can have very opposite effects on the body. It's not, so it's biphasic. It doesn't have a linear response curve. In other words, a linear response curve is a drug produces some effect, and taking more of it just increases that same effect. No, increasing a dose of THC can cause the opposite effect. Let's turn now finally here to depression. So depression, is a complicated disease. There's probably multiple diseases, but one theory of depression says that depression comes from social defeat. You feel defeated by other people, defeated by the social system, and that makes you depressed. And so depression is the result of a hypersensitivity to social threats. You have competitors in love, for money, for shelter and food, for anything. And these competitors dominate you, and you feel dominated, or you feel socially threatened, and you become depressed. Now, one of the symptoms of depression is called anhedonia, and anhedonia is an inability to take joy or pleasure in things. If you feel socially threatened, right, you're probably going to have anhedonia. Why? Because if you take an interest in things, you're going to want to go out into society and do those things. Right? If you take an interest in eating, you want to go out to a restaurant, go out and dine, go out or party with your friends, or, right, you like birds, you want to go out and take pictures of them, go out into society, or you like to shop, go out shopping. But if you feel socially threatened, right, any of those things are things where you're going to encounter other people, and those seem to be dangerous, hostile, and harmful. Right, so it would be natural if you feel socially defeated to have anhedonia. Anhedonia says, yeah, don't go out in the world. Don't feel interests in things. So THC seems to be able to treat anhedonia. THC is prohedonic, and its prohedonia is probably what most people associate with the cannabis high. Prohedonia means that you take an increased interest and pleasure in things, right? That you take pleasure in whatever, eating, walking around, talking to other people, going out into town, into the city, check it out. And so prohedonia seems to be something that the cannabis high probably just is. And that high can make you interested in all things like, wow, my car keys, they're fascinating. And this is a typical experience of the cannabis high, right? Things become super interesting, they become super salient or rewarding, right? So just sensory experience, you say, oh, look, a dollar bill. Wow, it's fascinating. Oh, the colors, oh, the shapes. Oh, there's a little owl above that one in the corner. Oh man, that kind of fascination with detail, taking extreme pleasure, is prohedonia, right? The kind of cannabis buzz or high is typically associated with prohedonia. Now, prohedonia probably doesn't treat depression, certainly doesn't cure depression. It treats a symptom of it. But this can lead to trouble because what happens is this. If you have dysfunctional CB receptors, and those are causing you to have anhedonia, you take some THC, those receptors get stimulated, you have prohedonia, you feel better. You think, I'll take more THC. Well, you take more THC and you repeat this, and the body says, gee, my CB receptors are getting overstimulated. I'm going to cut back on the CBD receptors. I'm going to pull some of those back into the cells, so now I have fewer CB receptors. Typically here's CB1 receptors, but also CB2. As your body has fewer CB receptors, you feel worse. You feel more depressed. So you say, I better take more THC. And, those few remaining CB receptors, they get more stimulated, and you say, I feel better. But you have to take even higher doses of THC to have the same effect. You build up a tolerance because the more THC you take, the fewer receptors you have, the more THC you have to take to stimulate those receptors. And now you have even fewer receptors because the body just keeps pulling them back. And now you need to take more THC, you have fewer receptors, more THC, and you're constantly feeling worse and worse and worse. And this is the typical cycle which leads to drug dependency. Now, I don't want to say that THC is addictive because that's a very loaded concept and it's very controversial. But that cycle, right, that downward spiral, that negative spiral of like taking more and more CB, more and more THC and having fewer and fewer receptors, that's problematic. That can make depression worse. Now, perhaps there are ways to deal with that by taking breaks in using THC for some as little as 2 days. Maybe it takes 4 weeks. Again, that's controversial. But these are issues we need to be aware of as we think about the ways THC is used to deal with mental issues. All right, so we talked a little bit here about using THC or CBD for pain, anxiety, and depression, and some of the benefits and dangers involved.